You and Me Create Society. And I think that poem really expresses sometimes how we feel the separation that has been created in our society. Looking at this year's theme is Living Everyday Wonder. And this month is all about relationships, right? So today we're talking about You and Me Create Society. So when we think about all of the messages that have come forth, I think you'll find one common theme. And what is that one common theme? Oneness. We are one with God and one with all. So what becomes important for us to recognize is to be that from the depth of our being. Now we're talking about relationships, and relationships have a broader view than just gathering people that have been created to form a society. When we form a society, we have agreements we've made consciously and or sometimes by default as living as a part of this world that we are in here on Earth. So the idea of separation has been a part of how our society has been formed. But today, just for today, in this moment, I want us to focus on relationships that we have within our society, while recognizing there are various nuances and various intersections that we have in the relationships that are closer to home. When we look at the relationships and how they're formed and how they influence not only society, but how they affect our global world, we are invited to look at and look for ways to engage society, to nurture, to embolden a healthier, more compassionate and equitable, loving relationships for all people. One of the values for Centers for Spiritual Living is to create a world that works for everyone, all of society. So now let's just think about this word society for a moment. In sociological terms, society refers to a group of people who live in a definable territory and share the same culture. On a broader scale, society consists of people and institutions around us, shared beliefs, and our cultural ideas. So when you look at society, it's very complex. There are various intersections of how society on planet Earth really looks. Because if we are looking at this from a global perspective, we have to look at all cultures, all people, and the societies within it. Now, I don't know about you, but I never really thought about the different types of societies. But there are multiple types of societies. So one is called transactional, where it is primary focus is getting a good deal for their members. Another one is called generative. These are societies that focus on knowledge as a unique differentiator. A third one type of society is where organizations leverage member knowledge for a seat at the table. So if we look at the different types of societies, that in and of itself shows us that even within just the United States, there are variable societies. In theory, we come together to form a society that makes laws while the government implements and enforces those laws. Once again, what is this? a separation. So a system has been designed on separation. We have been taught hierarchical systems and laws have been put into place to ensure that we are mentally separated. Did you know that the word society had this many aspects to it? I didn't. Well, because today's title is called You and Me in Society, I had to break it down a little bit. So there's all these laws that have been put into place in society. Now, of course, you know, we have a whole bunch of different kind of laws as well, right? We got the criminal laws, we have the governmental laws. So let's stop and think just about the federal laws. Now, you know, when you're driving, you got to have a license. You got to have the car registered, right? And in America, we drive on the right-hand side of the street. That's a cultural thing, right? So just within that one law, that might be considered transactional because it's all about driving, right? So the laws were designed to create order and to hopefully not have chaos. Laws have been preventative. The general laws that I just spoke of, such as driving, is considered a transactional law. Then we have our rights, the rights as it lives in our society, the right to have freedom of speech, to be able to have a public trial, the rights of process. So there's all these laws and these rights that make up our society, of which we now understand there are all different types of societies within this. These are the laws that man made. Man made these laws to actually help control the human aspects of our lives. What if, here's Sherry's favorite line, right? What if all of us on our spiritual path choose to step into utilizing the higher laws, not the human laws, but the spiritual laws. All of us who are on this call are here to grow spiritually. So we have a charge to understand and use the spiritual laws. Spiritual laws are often called the laws of nature. When we think of the word law, it really is perhaps one that we can define as a statement that describes, the law has meanings and definitions, but one that fits the subject of this particular discussion is a statement that describes relationships between the word universal laws, which is an adjective that is applied to the particular subject that we're talking about, spirituality. The universal law may be considered interchangeable with that word law of nature, the natural laws. Well, in context for our discussion today, I want you to stop and think about universal law as something that impacts both the physical plane here on earth, as well as the spiritual plane. In the spiritual plane, there is no time, there is no space. There's only the oneness of all time. This distinction between the two planes becomes very important because we live in both. We operate on the laws of living on planet Earth as well as the spiritual laws. These laws are said to be of two conditions: living here and existing in the spiritual world. Thomas Trord, in one of his earliest writings, said, living in both conditions, the spiritual and the emotional, the spiritual and the earthly plane, is a manner of the same thing, Both are necessary for formation of a substantial entity. So the laws for the physical world and the laws for the spiritual world, we operate in both. We are both human and divine. Today, our topic is about creating society. So when we think about creating society, here comes the acronym for today. Create starts with consciousness reveals everything, always transforming. We embrace spiritual oneness, creating an inner expansion touching you and me, the entire society. So now, when we talk about laws, we've talked about the human laws. Now it's time for us to take a look at the spiritual laws, the universal laws. So now there's 12 of them. And I have a slide that I want to share with you. And we're talking about the universal laws. The 12 universal laws, and this is the first one, the law of divine oneness. And we've heard us talk about this particular law quite a bit. This law is the foundational law of the universe. This idea speaks to the interconnectedness of all things, beyond our senses, beyond our thoughts, action, and any event. Everything is connected, any and everything. So we're talking about this law, the first law, which is the foundational law. The next law is the law of vibration. The law of vibration is at a microscopic level, everything is in constant motion. This applies to matter, but guess what? It also applies to our frequency as well. The law says that our vibrational frequency can inform our lived experience. So we've talked about energy, and we know how we are all energetic beings. Then we have the law of correspondence. This law states that patterns repeat throughout the universe, and on a personal level, our reality is a mirror of what's happening inside of us at this moment. Once again, we're talking about the consciousness. How many of you have heard the term as above, so below? That particular phrase speaks to the law of correspondence. What happens in the spiritual plane also can be duplicated on the human plane. When we are connected one with one, we acknowledge and use this law to create what we desire. The next, the law of attraction. Now, everybody's heard of this one, right? The law of attraction we speak of about on a couple of different ways, attracting abundance as well as love in our lives. I want to attract that love in my life. So the law of attraction is probably one of the ones, as I mentioned, but it says that like attracts like, that you get what you focus on. Once again, talking about those thoughts. The next one is the law of inspired action. This is closely related to the law of attraction. And it's all about taking those actionable steps to invite what it is that we want in our lives. And I'm going to stop there for a moment, because for me, living this move has really also allowed me to step into inspired action. I knew years ago that I wanted to be closer to my family. It's something that I desired, and I prayed about it for when it should happen. But then circumstances said it should be now. So what did I have to do? I had to take some actionable steps to get to California, which is where my family is. So I've had to use the steps, the spiritual world, and do what I needed to do on the physical plane. The next law, the law of perpetual transmutation of energy. This law states that on an energetic level, everything in the universe is constantly evolving, fluctuating. Every action is preceded by a what? A thought. With thoughts themselves having the power to eventually manifest in our physical reality. Wouldn't you say that works with the inspired action? For sure. The next law. This is the one we all talk about, the law of cause and effect. Pretty straightforward. It is a direct relation between the actions and the events. What is important to note about the law of cause and effect is that it always doesn't happen right away because we have those thoughts and those beliefs that are in our subconscious that we have to consciously choose to make to have a different experience. The law of compensation is the 8th law. This law relates to the law of attraction and the law of correspondence. You reap what you sow. We've all heard that one. That's in the Bible as well. With this law, we're stating our efforts will always come back to us positively, right? The law of relativity. This law suggests that we are inclined to compare things in our world, but in reality, everything is neutral. Relativism exists in all things, and in the end, it comes down to our own perspective and perception. So we have the filters based on our experiences. Wouldn't you say that that happens a lot in our society today, especially if you're looking at it from a political perspective? The law of polarity. This law says everything in life has an opposite, good and evil, love and fear, warmth and cold. The key is understanding that there is 2 sides to the same coin. It's all in the oneness. The 11th law is the law of rhythm. You know, I like that one, the law of rhythm, because the law of rhythm says everything has cycles. This is in the universe, the ebb and the flow. We can look at the ocean living in Florida and we see the rhythm of life. When we think about the seasons in the earth, everything is in rhythm. Everything is integrated for our growth. The law of rhythm. Last but not least, the law of gender. This law of gender has to do with masculine and feminine energy. We all have both masculine and feminine energy. It exists in all things. So when we think about the gender, the law of gender, we're talking about the masculine being, let's hurry up and let's do mentally. The feminine allows us to just be. So when we look at the 12 universal laws, I don't want us to get too overwhelmed. We don't have to remember all of these laws, but it becomes important for us to recognize how important it is for those of us who are living on the spiritual realm to utilize these laws for both ourselves individually and collectively. You and me make up society. We are in the oneness of the divine. We must remember these laws. Live our lives from these universal laws, because we are the spiritual beings. We are on this path, you and me. We must remember there's only one God, and the way we relate to ourselves and is how we want to relate to others. The world, this universal power, is interconnected, and we're inseparable, you and me. We are connected. We cannot claim to love God and hate others. We must recognize that you and me, we're one. There's only the oneness of God. This month, the invitation is to anchor our spiritual practice on engaging in relationships and actively reveling in the wonder of how each relationship ultimately is a relationship with ourselves, as well as with each other. When we talk about focusing our relationship that we have with society, while we live in this whole interconnectedness, I want us individually to think about how can we individually impact our society? How can we as spiritual beings make a difference in our society? What is your chosen way to make a difference in society? Is it to work with the homeless? Is it to work with the youth to have an impact on the next generation? Is it to work with social justice? Is it a way simply just to interact with each and every person that you come in contact with, seeing the God in them, living, moving, and being that expression of a unified society calls us to a new paradigm, a new way of being, where we practice teaching how to live in our beloved society. We are invited to embody the love of God, not just solely on an individual manner, but on a collective manner. That is our charge. I want to reiterate how the utilization of the universal laws impact us not only individually, but collectively. We are a society, you and me. In this society of you and me, we create society. So once again, today's is to create by having consciousness reveal everything is always transforming. We are transforming. We embrace spiritual oneness, creating inner expansion, touching you and me. There's only one society, you and me, and unity. And so it is.